When I was studying at university, I used to take 6 courses every semester. The reason was simple. I was completing a dual degree, and my goal was to finish everything within 4 years. Because of that decision, most semesters felt extremely overwhelming. I was constantly buried in homework, assignments, and endless studying. It honestly felt like I was drowning in academic work almost every single day. My university had a library that stayed open until midnight, and that place became almost like a second home to me. At the same time, during that semester, I was also doing an internship, which made my schedule even more packed. Because of this, I barely had enough hours in the day to finish all the work I needed to do. Back then, I was still living on campus. Unfortunately, my studentmates were often very loud, and their noise could be extremely distracting when I tried to study. Some nights it felt impossible to concentrate in my dorm. This particular day was a Wednesday night. I had already gone through 3 classes earlier that day, and on top of that I had completed my internship shift as well. But the pressure didn't stop there. The next day I had 2 important exams, which meant I desperately needed a quiet place to prepare. So, the moment I finished my internship, I didn't waste a second. I headed straight to the campus library to start studying. Our campus library was huge, much bigger than most people would expect. And when I finally walked inside that night, it was already 9z Oderd PMO, and something about the quiet atmosphere of that massive building at that hour already felt a little unsettling. At that time, there were still a fair number of students around the library. People were sitting at different tables, reading or typing quietly, but usually between 9z Hodred and 100, the building would start to become much quieter as many students slowly packed up and left. My plan was to stay there until 25 Oded because I needed those hours to prepare for my 2 exams scheduled for the next day. By around 11 Odred, most of the library had emptied out. Only a few people were still scattered around the large study areas. I was sitting at a table that was placed between 2 tall bookshelves, one on each side. That spot felt a little more private and hidden, which I liked because it meant fewer distractions while studying. Then at about 11 Odi, a man walked into the section where I was sitting. He looked like he was in his upper 20s. There were plenty of empty tables in the area, but instead of choosing one of those, he walked past them and came directly to my table. He pulled out a chair and sat diagonally across from me. I briefly looked up at him. He looked back at me and gave a small smile while placing his books on the table. I quickly looked back down at my laptop, trying not to think too much about why he had chosen my table when there were so many others available. I continued scrolling through my study slides on my laptop, focusing on the material for my exams. After a moment, the man spoke. "Excuse me," he said. Then he asked if I happened to be taking a specific economics course. I politely replied, "No, sorry," hoping that would be the end of the conversation. But instead of stopping, he began explaining why he asked. He said that his professor, according to him, was extremely strict and apparently gave pop quizzes almost every day. I responded with a quick, "Wow, that really sucks," and then tried to return my attention to studying. But at that point, my mind wasn't fully focused anymore. Now I was aware of this man sitting across from me, and I had a strong feeling he was going to keep trying to talk. A moment later, I looked up from my laptop screen and noticed him staring directly at me, smiling quietly with his lips. I immediately looked back down at my screen, thinking about whether I should pack up and move to another spot or maybe just leave the library completely. Then he suddenly asked me what my name was. Not wanting to give him my real name, I quickly made one up and said, "Chelsea." He looked at me and said, "You have such blue eyes, Chelsea." That was the moment I really started to question why this man was actually there. Was he truly here to study, or was he just trying to creep on women in the library? And the fact that he looked like he was almost 30 didn't make the situation feel any better. Trying to test him, I asked him what the name of his economics professor was. He paused for a second before answering, "Professor Davis." I then asked if he knew the professor's first name. He shook his head and said no. Right after that, I immediately opened the website Rate My Professor on my laptop. I went on ratemyprofessor.com and searched for any professor at our university with the last name Davis. Only one result appeared, and it wasn't even an economics professor. It was a calculus professor, and the most recent reviews were posted years ago. That immediately made me feel uneasy. At that point, I decided I shouldn't ignore my instincts. I stood up and walked toward the security worker at the front entrance of the library to ask for help. As I got up from my chair, I could clearly feel that man staring at me while I walked away from the table. I quietly told the security guard that the man at my table was making me uncomfortable and that I didn't think he was actually a student. The security worker immediately walked back with me to the table and asked the man to show his student ID. The man started searching through his wallet, then through his pockets, acting like he was trying to find it. After a moment, he said he must have left it in his dorm room. The security worker then asked him which dorm building he lived in. The man clearly didn't know what to say. He hesitated for a few seconds and then said, "I honestly don't remember what it's called." It was obvious he was lying. The security guard escorted him out of the library. Afterward, he returned and told me to be careful when walking back to my dorm later that night. I thanked him and went back to my table, but for the rest of the time I stayed in the library, my mind was completely distracted. I couldn't stop thinking about how strange and creepy that guy had been. I tried my best to focus and continue studying. Eventually, around 20 I knew it was time to leave so I could get at least a little sleep before my 2 exams the next day. I packed my things and left through the same exit where the security guard had escorted that man out earlier. When I walked outside, he wasn't standing there. I had no idea where he went. The campus was almost completely empty. Hardly anyone walks around that late on Monday to Wednesday nights, so the pathways were quiet and deserted. I was getting close to my dorm building when suddenly I heard a loud sound of a shoe hitting the concrete behind me. I immediately turned around. There was no one there, but I knew for a fact I had heard a footstep. My heart started racing, and I decided to start running toward my dorm. Carrying my backpack made it harder, but I didn't want to take any chances. The moment I started running, I suddenly heard running footsteps behind me. I turned my head and saw the same man from the library sprinting straight toward me. I screamed as loud as I could, but only for a second before he tackled me to the ground and forced his hand over my mouth. He kept whispering threats, saying, "You better shut up or I'll kill you." In that moment, I truly believed my life was about to end. I kept trying to scream for help, but his hand muffled my voice. Then he stood up while still holding me and began dragging me by the throat, pulling me away from the main walkways where people might see us. That's when I realized something even more terrifying. He was dragging me toward the woods near the dorm buildings. Somehow I managed to pull his hand away from my mouth for just a moment, and I screamed again as loud as I possibly could. That scream was enough. 2 guys nearby heard it and came running toward us, yelling, "Hey, stop!" at the man. The moment they approached, my attacker let go of me and started running toward the woods. The 2 guys rushed over to me. I'm sure they were asking if I was okay and trying to talk to me, but for a few moments, I couldn't hear anything. I was in complete shock. Then the reality of what had just happened hit me. I completely broke down and started crying uncontrollably. Those 2 guys called university police, and I tried my best to calm down enough to explain everything that had happened. We went back to the library, where the police spoke with the security worker who had interacted with the man earlier. His description matched exactly with the man I described. The police also checked the library security cameras, which gave them a clear image of the man's face. That picture was immediately sent out to all students' phones, emails, and the school website as a warning. Later that same night, someone anonymously reported that the man had been seen at a late night dive bar down the road from the university. Police went to the bar, found him there, and arrested him. The level of trauma that experience caused me was unbelievable. Even now, it's hard to describe how terrifying it was. And honestly, I can't even begin to imagine the trauma faced by people who weren't as lucky as I was in situations like this. When I was 7 years old, my family moved to a new town. Memories from before that time feel like pieces of a faded picture, unclear and hard to fully remember. This is one of those memories. I think I was around 5 or maybe 6 years old when this happened. There was a local town library that was only a few blocks from our house. Our mom would often take my brothers and me there. I clearly remember one particular day. My mom and my little brother, who was still a toddler then, spent the morning at the mall. We stayed there for hours while she did shopping. Whenever we visited that mall, she would always take us to the McDonald's inside the mall and buy us ice cream cones. I still remember that on this day. I was holding the leftover ice cream cone in my hand while we were walking toward the library after leaving the mall. The ice cream was slowly melting, and I was still finishing it as we walked. When we reached the library, there was a special children's computer area where my mom allowed me to sit and play games. I spent time playing old online computer games that were popular back then. After getting bored of playing, I stood up and started walking through the book aisles in the kids section, searching for I Spy books. The children's section was located in the far corner of the library. As I walked slowly between the book aisles, suddenly I heard a sound from behind me. Something was there, and I didn't know what or who was standing just a few steps away from me. I suddenly turned around, but there was nothing there. I was standing near the back wall of the library where another row of books was placed against the wall. While I was looking around, I suddenly saw half of a grown man's face slowly appear from behind the bookshelf. Then he said, "Peekaboo." At that moment, I actually laughed. I didn't feel scared at all. The man moved back behind the shelf again and then slowly leaned out once more, showing only half his face, and said, "Peekaboo," again. I kept laughing like it was just a game. He then asked me, "What are you looking for?" I told him I was searching for I Spy books. He smiled and said he would help me find them. Then he took my hand and started walking with me through the book aisles, guiding me toward the section where books starting with the letter I were placed. And there they were, at least 5 I Spy books sitting together on the shelf. I quickly grabbed my favorite one, the Treasure Hunt I Spy book. He said, "Let's go sit and play." He took me to a small table in the corner near some children's computers. We started looking through the pictures in the book. Time passed while we played. He kept asking me questions about myself while we played I Spy. The question that still stays in my mind is when he asked, "Who are you here with?" I told him I was with my mom and my little brother. After some time, he said something about a kid's playroom downstairs. At that age, I had no idea that the library even had a downstairs area. He said we could go down there and continue playing with the book. He then took me to the door that led to the basement of the library. Just for context, that basement was normally used for events and meetings for different clubs and groups. There was also a small playroom there, probably meant for parents who brought their children during meetings. He led me into that small playroom. There were many toys inside, especially a Lego table with Lego blocks and several chairs around it. He placed my I Spy book on top of the Lego table. This is where things started feeling very uncomfortable when I think back on it now. He was trying to force me to play with the toys even though I didn't feel like playing anymore. I started feeling uneasy. Around that same time, a female librarian spoke through the loudspeaker and said over the intercom, "Will Liam please come to the front? Your mother is looking for you." When that announcement came, the man suddenly went to turn off the lights in the room. In just seconds, the room became completely dark. He said, "In the dark, we're going to play hide and seek." That was the first moment I truly felt scared. I started calling for my mom loudly. I remember he kept telling me to stay quiet. His voice kept getting closer and louder as he moved toward me in the darkness, until suddenly I felt his hands on me. Thankfully, I somehow managed to push past him. I ran out of that room as fast as I could. I ran down the dark hallway toward the stairs. While running up the basement stairs, I felt that same childhood fear of running up basement stairs after turning off the lights, but this time it was 100 times worse because I was honestly afraid I would be grabbed. I finally reached the main floor of the library and ran straight to the front desk, calling for my mom. She was already there with a group of librarians. When she saw me, I could clearly see the relief on her face. I immediately told her that a man had taken me downstairs. She completely lost control of her emotions after hearing that. After that, I remember seeing several police officers inside the building, searching everywhere. But I never saw that man again. He probably left through another exit. I also remember speaking to a woman who was likely working with the police. She asked me very gentle and careful questions. I never really asked my mom about this experience many times because it still makes me very uncomfortable. And honestly, I just don't like thinking about it.